At 69, Claudine thought she'd seen every kind of betrayal until her own son tried to steal her home right from under her. She stood in her kitchen that Tuesday morning, humming softly as she stirred her coffee. The house felt different somehow, quieter, almost waiting. 40 years she'd lived in this brick home on Maple Street. 40 years of memories, of raising her children here as a widowed mother, of watching her grandchildren take their first steps across this very floor. But today, everything would change. The doorbell rang at exactly 9:15 a.m. Claudine knew who it was without looking. Terence, her eldest son, had been calling for days about this important family meeting. She'd been putting him off, hoping the whole thing would just go away. But Terence never let anything go away. "Morning, Mama," he said, stepping inside with that smile that never quite reached his eyes. Behind him came Selena, his wife, carrying a manila folder and wearing the same fake concern she'd been practicing for months. "Good morning, Mrs. Claudine," Selena cooed, her voice dripping with sweetness like honey laced with poison. "How are you feeling today? You look a little tired. Are you getting enough rest?" Claudine forced a smile. "I'm fine, baby. Come on in." They settled around her dining table, the same table where she'd fed her children, where she'd helped with homework, where she'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. Now Terence was spreading papers across it like a surgeon preparing for an operation. "Mama, we've talked about this," Terence began, his voice taking on that tone he used when he thought she wasn't listening. "It's just good planning. You're getting older, and we need to make sure everything's taken care of properly." The papers stared up at her. Legal documents with words like property transfer and signature required printed in bold black letters. Claudine's hands shook slightly as she reached for her reading glasses. She remembered the day she'd bought this house. 1983. She was 29 years old, newly widowed with 2 small children. Terence was only 8, Lydia just 5. The mortgage payment had been more than half her monthly salary from the hospital where she worked as a nursing assistant. But she'd made it work. She'd taken extra shifts, skipped meals so the children could eat, worn the same 3 dresses for years. She'd been determined to give her children stability, a real home where they could grow up feeling safe and loved. "Terence, honey," she said softly, "I've lived in this house for 40 years. This is my home." "Exactly, Mama," Selena chimed in, her smile widening. "And we just want to make sure it stays in the family. Don't you trust us to take care of you?" Trust. That word echoed in Claudine's mind like a church bell tolling for the dead. She trusted her husband, and he died young, leaving her to raise 2 children alone. She trusted the bank to work with her on payments when times got hard. She trusted her neighbors to watch out for her children when she worked night shifts. But this felt different. This felt like walking into a trap. The doorbell rang again. Miss Geraldine, Claudine's neighbor for over 30 years, stood on the porch holding a covered dish. "Morning, sugar," Miss Geraldine said, her sharp eyes immediately taking in the scene at the dining table. "I brought you some sweetbread. Figured you might need something to go with your coffee." She stepped inside, and Claudine could see the way her friend's shoulders tensed when she spotted the papers spread across the table. "What's all this?" Miss Geraldine asked, her voice casual, but her eyes alert. "Oh, just some family business," Selena said quickly, too quickly. "Terence is helping his mother with some legal matters." Miss Geraldine set the dish down and moved closer to the table. She was 72 years old, sharp as a tack, and she'd been watching Terence's behavior for years. She'd seen the expensive cars he drove despite claiming to be broke. She'd noticed the gambling receipts that sometimes fell out of his pockets. She'd heard the late-night phone calls when he thought no one was listening. "Legal matters?" Miss Geraldine repeated, her voice carrying an edge that made Terence shift uncomfortably in his chair. What kind of legal matters? Terence cleared his throat. Just some property planning. Making sure Mama's affairs are in order. Miss Geraldine's eyes narrowed. She'd seen this play before. She'd watched other elderly neighbors get talked into signing away their homes by children who promised to take care of everything. She'd seen how those promises always seemed to end with the elderly parent in a nursing home and the house sold for a quick profit. "Be careful, Sugar," Miss Geraldine said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. That boy got a hungry look in his eyes. Claudine felt her heart skip. Miss Geraldine had never been one to mince words, and she'd never spoken ill of anyone without good reason. If she was warning her about Terence. But before Claudine could respond, Selina was speaking again, her voice bright and false. "Miss Geraldine, you're so sweet to be concerned, but really, we just want what's best for Mrs. Claudine. We want to make sure she's taken care of in her golden years." Claudine reached for the pen Terence had placed beside the papers. Her hand was steady now, but her mind was racing. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Terence was too eager, Selina too helpful, and Miss Geraldine's warning kept echoing in her ears. "Just sign right there, Mama," Terence said, pointing to a line at the bottom of the page. "Then we can all relax and know everything's taken care of." But as Claudine's pen touched the paper, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the tense silence. Amara, her 16-year-old granddaughter, burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. "Grandma, don't sign anything," Amara cried, her voice cracking with emotion. "Don't do it." Terence jumped to his feet. "Amara, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at school." "I heard you talking on the phone last night," Amara sobbed, moving closer to her grandmother. "I heard you telling Deshawn that once the papers were signed, you'd finally have the money to cover your gambling debts. You said you were going to sell the house and put Grandma in a nursing home." The room fell silent. Claudine's pen dropped from her fingers, hitting the table with a soft clink. Terence's face went white, then red with rage. "That's not true," he shouted. "Amara, you misunderstood what you heard." But Selina's reaction told the real story. Her eyes darted between Terence and Amara, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She knew. She'd known all along. Claudine felt something inside her break. Not a physical break, but something deeper, something that had been holding her together for decades. The illusion of family unity, the hope that her children would always love and protect her, shattered like glass hitting concrete. Lydia, who had been standing in the hallway listening to every word, stepped into the room. Her face was set in lines of pure rage, and when she spoke, her voice was cold as ice. "Get out," she said to Terence and Selina. "Get out of Mama's house right now." Terence tried to protest, tried to explain, but Lydia wasn't having it. She'd suspected this was coming. She'd tried to warn her mother for months, but Claudine had always been too trusting, too willing to believe the best about her children. "Amara, come here," Claudine said softly, holding out her arms to her granddaughter. "Come here, baby." As Amara rushed into her grandmother's embrace, Claudine looked around her dining room, the room where she'd celebrated so many happy moments with her family. But now she saw it differently. She saw the cracks in the walls that needed fixing, the worn spots on the carpet where children had played, the memories that were worth more than any amount of money. And she realized that the real betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was about trust. It was about love. It was about a son who had chosen greed over family, who had been willing to throw away 40 years of memories for a quick payday. But what Terence didn't know was that Claudine had secrets of her own. Secrets that would change everything. Secrets that would make him wish he'd never walked through her door that morning. Because when you mess with a woman who's survived 69 years of life's hardest lessons, you better be ready for what comes next. But Terence wasn't the only one keeping secrets, and what Lydia discovered would change everything. Terence's face contorted between rage and panic as he watched his carefully constructed plan crumble. He lunged toward Amara, but Lydia stepped between them, her eyes blazing with protective fury. "Don't you dare touch her," Lydia hissed. "Don't you dare touch my niece." "Amara, honey, you misunderstood what you heard," Terence pleaded, his voice taking on that whiny tone he used when he was caught in a lie. "I was just talking to Deshawn about investment opportunities, not gambling debts." Selena found her voice, and it came out shrill and offensive. "Yes. Your father has been working on some business ventures. He's been trying to provide for this family." But Amara shook her head, tears still flowing. "I heard you say you were going to sell Grandma's house to pay off what you owe the bookies. You said she was too old to fight back, and that nursing home would be cheaper than keeping the house." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Claudine felt her knees weaken, and she grabbed the back of her chair to steady herself. 40 years. 40 years of raising this man, of believing in him, of defending him when others questioned his choices. "Terence," she whispered, "tell me this isn't true." Lydia reached into her purse and pulled out a thick folder. "Mama, I've been looking into Terence's finances for months. I didn't want to worry you, but I had to know what was really going on." She spread documents across the dining table, pushing aside Terence's property transfer papers. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications, all showing a pattern that made Claudine's blood run cold. "Look at this," Lydia said, pointing to a highlighted section. "Terence has been withdrawing money from your savings account for the past 8 months. Small amounts, $200 here, $300 there, so you wouldn't notice. But it adds up to over $12,000. Terence's face went pale. That's not what it looks like. I was just borrowing it. I was going to pay it back." "Borrowing?" Lydia's laugh was bitter. "You didn't ask permission. You didn't leave notes. You just took it. And look at this credit card statement from last month, $8,000 in charges at the casino downtown." Selena gasped. "That's not possible. Terence doesn't gamble." But the evidence was right there in black and white. Receipts from poker games, sports betting slips, even a loan application showing Terence had tried to get $50,000 using his mother's house as collateral. Miss Geraldine stepped forward, her voice heavy with sadness. "I've seen him at the casino, Sugar. Late at night, when he thought no one was watching. I've seen him lose money he didn't have." Claudine sank into her chair, the weight of betrayal pressing down on her chest. "All those times you said you needed money for the kids, for medical bills, for car repairs. Those were real expenses." Terence insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Real expenses that you covered with money you stole from me," Claudine said quietly. "Money I worked night shifts to earn. Money I saved so I could help my grandchildren go to college." Amara moved closer to her grandmother, her young face filled with pain. "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't know how." "No, baby, you did exactly the right thing," Claudine said, wrapping her arm around Amara's shoulders. "You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Terence's desperation was growing. "Mama, listen to me. I can fix this. I can pay back every penny. I just need you to sign those papers so I can get the money to make everything right." But Selena was pulling on his arm, her face showing the first signs of panic. "Terence, maybe we should go. This isn't the right time." "No," Terence shouted, shaking off her grip. "This is exactly the right time. Mama, you have to understand. I'm your son. You can't just abandon me when I need help. The words hit Claudine like physical blows. Abandon you? Terrence, I've been supporting you for 40 years. I've given you everything I had, and you've taken even more behind my back. Just then, Claudine's phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number, but something made her answer. Mrs. Claudine? A man's voice asked. This is Detective Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit. I'm calling about your son, Terrence. The room went completely silent. Even Terrence stopped his desperate pleas, his eyes widening in shock. I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, but we've been investigating a gambling ring that's been operating in your area. Your son's name came up in connection with some outstanding debts to some unsavory characters. Claudine felt the room spin around her. What kind of debts? Ma'am, I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but I would strongly advise you not to sign any property transfers or loan documents until we can meet in person. These people your son owes money to, they're dangerous. Terrence lunged for the phone, but Lydia grabbed it first. Detective Martinez? This is Lydia, Claudine's daughter. Can you tell us more about what's happening? I can't discuss details, but I can tell you that your brother owes these people a substantial amount of money, and they've been known to use family members as leverage to collect their debts. The detective's words hung in the air like a death sentence. Selena was backing toward the door, her face white with fear. Terrence was shaking, his carefully constructed lies falling apart around him. Terrence, Claudine said, her voice barely above a whisper. How much do you owe them? Terrence's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Finally, he whispered, $80,000. The number hit Claudine like a physical blow.
$82,000.
More than her house was worth. More than she had in savings. More than she could ever hope to earn in the years she had left. That's why you wanted the house, she said, understanding finally dawning. You weren't trying to protect me. You were trying to save yourself. Terrence collapsed into a chair, his facade of confidence completely shattered. Mama, you don't understand. These people, they don't mess around. If I don't pay them back, they'll hurt me. They might hurt you too. Amara gasped, and Lydia moved closer to her mother protectively. What do you mean? They might hurt her? Lydia demanded. I overheard them talking, Terrence said, his voice trembling. They said if I couldn't get the money from selling the house, they'd find other ways to make me pay. They mentioned making an example of my family. Claudine felt a chill run down her spine. All these years of trying to protect her children, and now her son had brought danger to their doorstep. Terrence, she said slowly, what exactly did you do to get into debt with these people? Terrence looked at the floor, unable to meet his mother's eyes. I thought I could win it all back. I kept betting bigger and bigger, thinking my luck would change. But it never did. And then I started borrowing money from them, promising to pay it back with interest. And when you couldn't pay? Lydia asked. I kept borrowing more and more, until I owed them more than I could ever hope to earn in a lifetime. Miss Geraldine had seen this coming for years, but what she knew about Selena would shock them all. Detective Martinez's voice came through the phone again. Mrs. Claudine, I need to warn you. These people are monitoring your son's activities. They know about the property transfer papers. If you sign those documents, they'll consider the house theirs, and they won't stop there. Claudine looked around her dining room, the room where she'd celebrated so many happy moments with her family. Now it felt like a battlefield, with danger lurking just outside the door. Terrence, she said, her voice filled with a mother's love and a woman's steel, you've brought a war to our doorstep. But what you don't understand is that I've been fighting battles for 69 years. And I'm not about to let you lose this one for all of us. She picked up the property transfer papers and tore them in half. The house stays in my name, she said firmly. And we're going to figure out how to get you out of this mess without losing everything I've worked for. But as she spoke, a shadow passed by the front window. Someone was watching the house. Someone who had been waiting for Terence to deliver on his promises. And they weren't the kind of people who took no for an answer. Claudine's heart pounded as she watched the shadow move past her front window. Someone was definitely out there, watching, waiting. The detective's warning about dangerous people monitoring Terence's activities suddenly felt very real. "Everyone stay calm," she said, moving toward the window to get a better look. "Lydia, call the police. Tell them we need an officer here immediately." But Miss Geraldine was already moving, her years of experience as a retired school principal kicking in. "Sugar, don't go near that window. If they're watching for a reason." Terence was shaking, his face pale with fear. "They know I'm here. They know I was supposed to get you to sign those papers today. If I don't deliver..." "Deliver what?" Lydia demanded, still holding the phone. "What exactly were you supposed to deliver to them?" But before Terence could answer, Miss Geraldine spoke up, her voice heavy with knowledge she'd been carrying for months. "Claudine, I need to tell you something about Selena. Something I've been keeping quiet because I didn't want to interfere in your family business. But now I can't stay silent anymore." Selena's face went white. "Miss Geraldine, you don't know what you're talking about. You're just trying to cause trouble." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Miss Geraldine said, her eyes sharp and knowing. "I've been watching you for 3 years, ever since you married Terence. I've seen the way you manipulate people, the way you always seem to know exactly what to say to get what you want." She turned to Claudine. "Sugar, Selena has been married 3 times before Terence. Did you know that?" Claudine shook her head, her eyes wide with shock. Her first husband was a widower with a nice house in the suburbs. He died suddenly of a heart attack 6 months after they married. Selena inherited everything: the house, his life insurance, his savings. Lydia gasped. "You're not suggesting..." "I'm not suggesting anything," Miss Geraldine said firmly. "I'm just telling you what I found out when I started digging. Her second husband was an elderly man with dementia. She had him declared incompetent and became his legal guardian. He died in a nursing home 6 months later, and she inherited his entire estate." Amara moved closer to her grandmother, her young face filled with horror. "That's not possible. She's been so nice to us." "Nice?" Miss Geraldine's laugh was bitter. "Honey, that's how she operates. She's nice until she gets what she wants. Then she disappears, leaving behind a trail of broken families and empty bank accounts." Selena was backing toward the door, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "This is ridiculous. You're all just trying to turn against me because Terence made some bad financial decisions." But Miss Geraldine wasn't finished. She pulled out her own folder, filled with newspaper clippings and legal documents she'd collected over the years. "Look at this," she said, showing Claudine a newspaper article. Selena's third husband was a retired businessman who owned several rental properties. He died of natural causes 8 months after their wedding. The coroner found traces of sleeping medication in his system, but it was ruled accidental. Claudine's hands were shaking as she read the article. "This can't be true. Terence, did you know about any of this?" Terence looked at Selena, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal. "You told me you'd only been married once before. You said your first husband died in a car accident." Selena's mask was slipping, her carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of Miss Geraldine's revelations. "Terence, honey, you don't understand. These people are just trying to turn you against me." But Miss Geraldine was relentless. "Selena, I've been watching you since the day you moved into this neighborhood. I've seen you cozy up to elderly neighbors, offering to help with their finances, their legal affairs. I've seen you at the senior center, volunteering to help with estate planning. She turned to Claudine. Sugar, I tried to warn you months ago when I saw her going through your mail. Remember when you thought you'd misplaced those bank statements? She was looking for information about your assets. Claudine remembered. She thought she was just being forgetful, but now she realized Selena had been systematically gathering information about her finances, her property, her vulnerabilities. Just then, Lydia's phone rang. It was Detective Martinez calling back. Ms. Lydia? I need to speak with your mother immediately. We've just received some disturbing information about your brother's situation. Lydia put the phone on speaker so everyone could hear. Mrs. Claudine, I need to ask you something. Has anyone been asking you about your property recently? Anyone who seemed overly interested in your financial situation? Claudine looked at Selena, who was now standing by the door, ready to bolt. Yes, Detective. My daughter-in-law has been very interested in my finances. Mrs. Claudine, we believe your son's gambling debts may be connected to a larger criminal operation. These people don't just target gamblers, they target their families. They use sophisticated manipulation techniques to gain access to elderly people's assets. Miss Geraldine nodded grimly. I knew it. I knew there was something bigger going on here. The detective continued. We've been tracking a group that uses women like Selena to target elderly homeowners. They marry into families, gain trust, then systematically drain their victims' resources. Mrs. Claudine, I need you to understand, you're not just dealing with a gambling debt. You're dealing with professional criminals. Terrence's face went white. That's not possible. Selena loves me. She wouldn't. But Selena was already moving toward the door, her bag in hand. This is ridiculous. I'm not staying here to listen to these lies. Selena, wait. Terrence called out, but she was already gone, the front door slamming behind her. The room fell silent except for the sound of Terrence's ragged breathing. He looked at his mother, his sister, his daughter, and for the first time in years, he seemed to truly see them. Mama, he whispered. What have I done? Claudine moved to her son's side, her heart breaking for the man he'd become. Terrence, we're going to get through this. But first, you need to tell us everything. How did you meet Selena? How did you get involved with these people? Terrence sank into a chair, his hands shaking. It started at the casino. I was losing money, and this man approached me. He said he could help me win it back, but I needed to prove I was good for the money. He asked about my family, my mother's house. Lydia gasped. They targeted you because of Mama's house. They said it was worth a lot of money, that I could use it as collateral. But when I said I couldn't just give them the house, he introduced me to Selena. They said she could help me figure out how to make it work. Miss Geraldine's eyes narrowed. They set you up with Selena to help them steal your mother's house. It's a classic honey trap. Terrence nodded, tears streaming down his face. I didn't know. I thought she really loved me. But every time I tried to back out, they threatened me. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my family. Amara was crying now, her young heart breaking for her father. Daddy, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you. I was ashamed, Terrence said. I was ashamed of the gambling, ashamed of the debt, ashamed of what I'd become. I thought I could fix it myself, but I just made everything worse. But as he spoke, a shadow passed by the front window. Someone was watching the house. Someone who had been waiting for Terrence to deliver on his promises. And they weren't the kind of people who took no for an answer. Lydia had always been the quiet one, but when it came to protecting her mother, she was ready for war. Detective Martinez's voice crackled through the speakerphone, urgent and commanding. Mrs. Claudine, I need you to listen carefully. These people are monitoring your son's activities. They know about the property transfer papers. If you sign those documents, they'll consider the house theirs and they won't stop there. Claudine felt her blood run cold. She looked at her dining room, the room where she'd celebrated so many happy moments with her family. Now it felt like a battlefield, with danger lurking just outside the door. "Detective," Lydia said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" "Ms. Lydia, we've been tracking this operation for months. They use women like Selena to target elderly homeowners. They marry into families, gain trust, then systematically drain their victims' resources. But it's not just about money. They're using these relationships to gain access to properties they can sell or use as collateral for other criminal activities." Terence was shaking, his face pale with fear. "They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my family. They said they knew where Amara went to school, where Lydia worked." Lydia's eyes blazed with protective fury. "They threatened my daughter?" "Terence, honey," Claudine said softly, moving to her son's side. "We're going to get through this. But first, you need to tell us everything. How did you meet Selena? How did you get involved with these people?" Terence sank into a chair, his hands shaking. "It started at the casino. I was losing money and this man approached me. He said he could help me win it back, but I needed to prove I was good for the money. He asked about my family, my mother's house." Lydia gasped. "They targeted you because of Mama's house. They said it was worth a lot of money, that I could use it as collateral. But when I said I couldn't just give them the house, they introduced me to Selena. They said she could help me figure out how to make it work." Miss Geraldine's eyes narrowed. "They set you up with Selena to help them steal your mother's house. It's a classic honey trap." Terence nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know. I thought she really loved me. But every time I tried to back out, they threatened me. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd hurt my family." Amara was crying now, her young heart breaking for her father. "Daddy, why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you." "I was ashamed," Terence said. "I was ashamed of the gambling, ashamed of the debt, ashamed of what I'd become. I thought I could fix it myself, but I just made everything worse." Lydia moved closer to her brother, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, pity, and a fierce determination to protect what was left of their family. "Terence," Lydia said, her voice carrying an edge that made everyone in the room pay attention, "I need to know everything. Every detail, every conversation, every threat, because I'm not going to let these people destroy our family." She pulled out her phone and started making calls. First to her lawyer, then to a private investigator she'd been consulting with for weeks. "Ms. Lydia," Detective Martinez said through the phone, "I need to warn you. These people are dangerous. They've been known to use violence when their plans are disrupted. You need to be very careful." Lydia's response was immediate and fierce. "Detective, I've been careful for months. I've been watching my brother, investigating Selena, gathering evidence. But now it's time to stop being careful and start being smart." She turned to her mother. "Mama, I need you to trust me. I need you to let me handle this my way. These people think they can manipulate us because we're family, because we're vulnerable. But they don't know who they're dealing with." Claudine looked at her daughter, really looked at her, and saw something she'd never noticed before. Lydia had always been the quiet one, the responsible one, the one who took care of everyone else. But now she saw something else, a steel core, a determination that had been forged through years of watching her family struggle, years of being the one who had to pick up the pieces. "Lydia," Claudine said softly, "what are you planning?" Lydia's lawyer, Marcus Thompson, arrived within an hour. He was a tall, imposing man with a reputation for taking on cases that other lawyers wouldn't touch. He'd been working with Lydia for weeks, gathering evidence, building a case. "Mrs. Claudine," Marcus said, shaking her hand firmly. I've been reviewing your situation. Based on what Lydia has told me and what I've discovered through my own investigation, we have a strong case for elder abuse and financial exploitation. He spread documents across the dining table, pushing aside the torn property transfer papers. These people have been targeting you for months. They've been systematically gathering information about your assets, your vulnerabilities, your family dynamics. They've been using your son's gambling addiction to manipulate him into helping them steal your property. Claudine felt the room spin around her. How long have you known about this? Lydia came to me 3 months ago, Marcus said. She suspected something was wrong, but she didn't have proof. She asked me to investigate quietly, to gather evidence without alerting anyone. That's why we have so much information now. Terence looked at his sister, his face filled with shame and gratitude. Lydia, you've been protecting us all this time? I've been protecting Mama, Lydia said firmly. And I'm not going to stop now. Marcus continued. We have evidence of Selena's previous marriages, her pattern of targeting elderly men, her connections to this criminal organization. We have proof that Terence has been systematically stealing from your savings account. We have documentation of the threats made against your family. He looked at Claudine. Mrs. Claudine, these people are not going to stop just because we've disrupted their plan. They're going to escalate. They're going to try other tactics. But we're ready for them. Lydia turned to her brother, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. Terence, I need you to understand something. What you've done is unforgivable. You've betrayed Mama. You've put Amara in danger. You've destroyed our family's trust. But you're still my brother, and I'm not going to let these people destroy you. Terence's face crumpled with emotion. Lydia, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what I was getting into. I thought I could handle it, but I just made everything worse. You're right. You did make everything worse, Lydia said, her voice sharp but not cruel. But now it's time to fix it. Now it's time to fight back. She pulled out her phone and showed him a text message.
I've been in contact with the FBI.
They've been investigating this organization for months. They want to use you as a witness to help them bring down the entire operation. Terence's eyes widened. The FBI? But they said if I talked to the police, they'd kill me. They said a lot of things, Lydia said firmly. But they're not going to kill you. They're not going to hurt our family. Because we're not going to let them. She looked at her mother. Mama, I need you to trust me. I need you to let me handle this. These people think they can manipulate us because we're family, because we're vulnerable. But they don't know who they're dealing with. Claudine felt a surge of pride for her daughter. Lydia, I've never been prouder of you than I am right now. You do what you need to do to protect this family.
Just then the doorbell rang.
Everyone froze, their eyes darting to the front door. Don't answer it, Marcus said, moving toward the window to see who was outside. But Amara was already moving toward the door. It might be someone who needs help.
Amara, no.
Lydia called out, but it was too late. Amara had already opened the door. Standing on the porch was a man in a dark suit, his face expressionless, his eyes cold. Behind him stood 2 other men, their hands in their pockets, their posture threatening. Mrs. Claudine, the man in the suit said, his voice smooth and professional. My name is Mr. Johnson. I represent the interests of some people who are very concerned about your recent decisions. They've asked me to come here and discuss your situation. Claudine felt her blood run cold. These weren't just criminals. These were professionals. These were people who knew how to get what they wanted, who had resources and connections that went far beyond what she'd imagined. But as she looked at her daughter, she saw something that gave her hope. Lydia's face was set in lines of pure determination, her eyes blazing with a fire that couldn't be extinguished. Mr. Johnson, Lydia said, stepping forward, her voice steady and strong. "I think you need to understand something. You're not dealing with a vulnerable elderly woman anymore. You're dealing with a family that's ready to fight back. And we're not going to lose." What Claudine discovered at Deschamps' house would prove her son wasn't just a gambler, he was a thief. Mr. Johnson's cold eyes swept across the room, taking in every detail: the torn property transfer papers, the legal documents spread across the table, the faces of everyone present. His expression never changed, but Claudine could sense the calculation behind those dead eyes. "Mrs. Claudine," he said smoothly, "I understand there's been some confusion about your property situation. My clients are very concerned that you might be making decisions based on incomplete information." Lydia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Mr. Johnson, I think you need to understand something. You're not dealing with a vulnerable elderly woman anymore. You're dealing with a family that's ready to fight back." Mr. Johnson's smile was thin and humorless. "Ms. Lydia, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I'm here to discuss business, not family dynamics. My clients have a legitimate interest in your brother's financial situation, and they're prepared to work with your family to resolve this matter amicably." Terence was shaking, his face pale with fear. "They said if I talked to the police, they'd kill me. They said they knew where Amara went to school, where Lydia worked." "Terence, please," Mr. Johnson said, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be." But Lydia wasn't backing down. "Mr. Johnson, I think you need to leave. This is a private family matter, and you're not welcome here." After Mr. Johnson and his associates left, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Everyone was processing what had just happened, the reality of the threat they were facing. "Lydia," Claudine said softly, "what are we going to do?" Lydia looked at her mother, then at her brother, then at her daughter. "We're going to fight back. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." She turned to Marcus. "I need you to investigate Deschamps. I need to know everything about him, his connections, his criminal history. Because I have a feeling he's the key to this whole operation." Marcus nodded. "I'll start digging immediately. But Lydia, I need to warn you. These people are dangerous. They're not going to stop just because we've disrupted their plan." "I know," Lydia said firmly, "but neither are we." She looked at her brother. "Terence, I need you to tell me everything about Deschamps. How did you meet him? What does he do? Where does he live?" Terence's hands were shaking as he spoke. "I met him at the casino about 6 months ago. He was winning big, and I was losing everything. He said he could teach me how to win, but I needed to prove I was serious. He asked about my family, my mother's house. He was gathering intelligence," Marcus said. "He was building a profile of your family, looking for vulnerabilities he could exploit." Terence nodded. "He said he had connections, people who could help me get the money I needed. But when I said I couldn't just give them the house, he introduced me to Selena. He said she could help me figure out how to make it work." 2 hours later, Lydia, Marcus, and Detective Martinez were standing outside Deschamps' house, a rundown duplex in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The house looked abandoned, but they knew better. "Lydia," Detective Martinez said, "I need to warn you. This is a dangerous situation. These people are not going to be happy to see us." "I know," Lydia said, her voice steady, "but I need to see this for myself. I need to understand what we're dealing with." They approached the house carefully, Marcus in the lead, his hand on his weapon. The front door was slightly ajar, and they could hear voices inside, angry voices, raised in argument. Lydia peeked through the window and saw a scene that made her blood run cold. Deschamps was standing in the middle of the room, surrounded by several men who looked like they'd stepped out of a crime movie. They were arguing about money, about deadlines, about consequences. Terence was supposed to deliver the house by now, one of the men was saying. If he doesn't come through, we're going to have to take other measures. Deshawn's response was chilling. Don't worry about Terence. If he doesn't cooperate, we'll use the girl. She's young, she's vulnerable, and she's the key to getting to the old woman. Lydia felt her blood run cold. They were talking about Amara. They were planning to use her daughter as leverage. Detective Martinez motioned for them to step back, but Lydia couldn't move. She was frozen in place, listening to the conversation inside, her heart pounding with fear and rage. We've been watching the family for months, Deshawn was saying. We know their routines, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. The old woman is the key. She's the one who owns the property. She's the one who has the money. But what if she doesn't cooperate? Another voice asked. Then we'll make her cooperate, Deshawn said, his voice cold and calculating. We'll use the girl. We'll make the old woman choose between her property and her granddaughter's safety. Lydia felt her world tilt on its axis. These weren't just criminals. These were monsters. They were planning to kidnap Amara, to use her as a bargaining chip to force Claudine to sign over her house. Lydia, Detective Martinez whispered, we need to go.
Now.
Before they see us. But Lydia couldn't move. She was staring through the window, watching these men plan the destruction of her family, and she felt something inside her snap. Back at Claudine's house, Lydia was pacing the living room, her mind racing with what she'd just heard. She couldn't unsee what she'd seen, couldn't unhear what she'd heard. Mama, she said, turning to her mother, I need to tell you something. These people are not just trying to steal your house. They're planning to kidnap Amara. They're going to use her to force you to sign over your property. Claudine's face went white.
What?
How do you know this? I heard them talking, Lydia said, her voice trembling with rage. I heard them planning it. They've been watching us, studying us, looking for ways to exploit us. And they've decided that Amara is the key to getting what they want. Amara was crying, her young face filled with terror. Aunt Lydia, what are we going to do? Lydia looked at her daughter, then at her mother, then at her brother. We're going to fight back. We're going to make sure these people never get anywhere near you, or Mama, or this house. She turned to Marcus. I need you to file for a restraining order. I need you to get us protection. And I need you to help me build a case that will put these people away for life. Marcus nodded. I'll do everything I can. But Lydia, I need to warn you. These people are dangerous. They're not going to stop just because we've disrupted their plan. I know, Lydia said firmly. But neither are we. And I'm not going to let them destroy my family. She looked around the room, at the people she loved most in the world, and she made a vow that would change everything. No one is going to hurt my family, she said, her voice filled with steel. No one is going to take what's ours. And no one is going to make us live in fear. We're going to fight back, and we're going to win. Just then, the phone rang. It was Detective Martinez calling from his car outside Deshawn's house. Lydia, I need to tell you something.
I just received a call from the FBI.
They've been investigating this organization for months, and they're ready to make their move. But they need your cooperation. They need you to help them bring down the entire operation. Lydia felt a surge of hope. What do they need from me? They need you to wear a wire. They need you to meet with these people, to record their conversations, to gather evidence that will put them away for life. But Lydia, it's dangerous. If they discover what you're doing, they won't hesitate to kill you. Lydia looked around the room, at her family, at the house that had been their home for 40 years. She thought about Amara, about her mother, about everything they'd built together. And she made her decision. I'll do it, she said firmly. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family. But I need you to promise me something. I need you to promise me that if anything happens to me, my family will be protected. Detective Martinez's response was immediate and certain. Lydia, I give you my word. Your family will be protected, no matter what happens. But as Lydia hung up the phone, she knew that the real battle was just beginning, and she was ready for war. When the papers arrived, Claudine realized this wasn't just about her house, it was about her life. 3 days later, Lydia sat in a small conference room at the FBI field office, listening to Special Agent Rodriguez explain the operation that would change everything. Ms. Lydia, Agent Rodriguez said, his voice professional but warm, we've been tracking this organization for 18 months. They've been targeting elderly homeowners across 5 states, using sophisticated manipulation techniques to gain access to their assets. Your family is just the latest target, but we believe you can help us bring down the entire operation. Lydia looked at the surveillance photos spread across the table. Pictures of Deshawn, Selena, and several other individuals she didn't recognize. How many people are we talking about? At least 20 individuals, including the woman who married your brother. Selena has been involved in 3 previous cases that we know of, all following the same pattern: marriage, manipulation, and eventual asset theft. Lydia felt her blood run cold. 3 previous cases? How many people has she destroyed? Agent Rodriguez's face was grim. We've identified at least 6 elderly victims who lost their homes and life savings. 2 of them died within 6 months of losing their assets, likely from the stress and financial devastation. Lydia's hands were shaking as she looked at the photos. And you want me to help you stop them? We want you to help us bring them to justice, Agent Rodriguez said firmly. But I need to be completely honest with you. This is dangerous. These people have killed before. If they discover what you're doing, they won't hesitate to eliminate you. Lydia spent the next 2 hours learning about the operation, the risks, and the potential rewards. The FBI had been building a case against this organization for months, but they needed someone on the inside, someone who could record conversations, gather evidence, and provide testimony that would hold up in court. Here's how it works, Agent Rodriguez explained, showing her a small recording device. This is a digital recorder that can capture conversations from up to 20 feet away. It's undetectable by standard security equipment, and it can store up to 40 hours of audio. Lydia examined the device, her mind racing with the implications. And if they find it, then you're dead, Agent Rodriguez said bluntly. But we'll have agents monitoring your location at all times. If anything goes wrong, we'll extract you immediately. Lydia looked at the photos again, at the faces of the people who had destroyed so many lives. What do you need me to do? Deshawn is going to contact you within the next 48 hours. He's going to try to pressure you into convincing your mother to sign the property transfer papers. When he does, you need to agree to meet with him. You need to act like you're willing to cooperate, like you're desperate to protect your family. And then you record everything. Every conversation, every threat, every piece of evidence that will help us put these people away for life. When Lydia arrived back at her mother's house, she found Claudine sitting in the living room, staring at a stack of legal documents that had arrived that morning. "Mama," Lydia said softly, "what's all this?" Claudine looked up, her face pale with shock. "Lydia, they're trying to have me declared mentally incompetent. They're claiming I'm not capable of making decisions about my own property." Lydia felt her blood run cold. Who's claiming this? Selena. She's filed a petition with the court, claiming that I'm suffering from dementia and need a legal guardian. She's asking the court to appoint her as my conservator, which would give her complete control over my finances and property. Lydia picked up the documents, her hands shaking with rage. This is insane. You're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. I know, Claudine said, her voice filled with a mix of anger and fear. But they've been gathering evidence. They've been talking to my neighbors, my doctors, even my church members. They're trying to paint a picture of a confused, vulnerable old woman who needs to be protected from herself. Lydia looked at the documents more carefully, and what she saw made her blood boil. Mama, they've been following you. They've been documenting your daily activities, your conversations, your medical appointments. They've been building a case against you for months. Claudine's face crumpled with emotion. Lydia, what are we going to do? If they succeed, they'll have complete control over my life. They'll be able to sell my house, drain my bank accounts, put me in a nursing home if they want to. Lydia pulled out her phone and called Marcus. I need you to get over here immediately. Selena has filed a petition to have Mama declared mentally incompetent. Marcus arrived within an hour, his face grim as he reviewed the documents. This is a sophisticated operation. They've been gathering evidence for months, building a case that will be difficult to refute. What kind of evidence? Lydia asked. Medical records, witness statements, financial documents. They've been talking to your mother's neighbors, her doctors, even her church members. They're trying to paint a picture of a confused, vulnerable elderly woman who needs to be protected from herself. Claudine was shaking with rage. I am not confused. I am not vulnerable. I am a grown woman who has been taking care of herself for 69 years. I know that, Mrs. Claudine, Marcus said gently. But the court doesn't know that. The court only knows what's in these documents, and what's in these documents is a carefully constructed narrative designed to make you look incompetent. Lydia felt her blood run cold. What are we going to do? We're going to fight back, Marcus said firmly. We're going to gather our own evidence, build our own case, and prove that you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions. He pulled out a legal pad and started making notes. First, we need to get you evaluated by an independent medical professional, someone who has no connection to Selena or her organization. Second, we need to gather character witnesses, people who can testify to your mental competence and decision-making abilities. And third, Lydia asked, third, we need to prove that this petition is part of a larger criminal conspiracy. We need to show the court that Selena is not acting in your best interests, but in the interests of a criminal organization that wants to steal your property. As Marcus worked on building their legal case, Lydia couldn't stop thinking about the FBI operation. She knew that Deshawn would be contacting her soon, and she needed to be ready. Mama, she said softly, I need to tell you something. The FBI has been investigating this organization for months. They believe that Selena and Deshawn are part of a larger criminal operation that has been targeting elderly homeowners across multiple states. Claudine's eyes widened. The FBI? Lydia, what are you involved in? I'm involved in protecting our family, Lydia said firmly. But Mama, I need you to understand something. These people are dangerous. They've killed before. If they discover what we're doing, they won't hesitate to eliminate us. Claudine felt her blood run cold. Lydia, what are you planning to do? I'm planning to help the FBI bring down this organization, Lydia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. But I need you to trust me. I need you to let me handle this my way. Just then, Lydia's phone rang. It was an unknown number, but she knew who it was. Hello, she said, her voice carefully controlled. Ms. Lydia. Deshawn's voice came through the phone, smooth and menacing. I need to speak with you about your mother's situation. I think we can work something out that will benefit everyone involved. Lydia looked at her mother, then at Marcus, then at the recording device hidden in her purse. I'm listening. Good. I'd like to meet with you privately. There are some things we need to discuss that aren't appropriate for phone conversations. Lydia felt her heart pound with fear and anticipation. When and where? Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., at the old warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. Come alone, and don't tell anyone where you're going. If you cooperate, we can resolve this matter without any unpleasantness. If you don't, well, let's just say that your family situation could become very complicated." The line went dead, and Lydia looked around the room at the people she loved most in the world. She knew that what she was about to do could cost her everything. But she also knew that if she didn't do it, they would lose everything anyway. As Lydia hung up the phone, she felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She was about to walk into a meeting with dangerous criminals, wearing a wire, risking her life to protect her family. "Mama," she said softly, "I need you to promise me something. If anything happens to me, if I don't come back from this meeting, you need to know that I love you. You need to know that I did this to protect our family." Claudine's face crumpled with emotion. "Lydia, please don't do this. There has to be another way." "There isn't," Lydia said firmly. "These people are not going to stop. They're not going to give up. They're going to keep coming until they get what they want. And the only way to stop them is to bring them down." She looked at her mother, at Marcus, at the legal documents spread across the table. She thought about Amara, about her brother, about everything they'd built together. And she made her decision. "I'm going to that meeting," she said, her voice filled with steel. "And I'm going to make sure these people never hurt another family again." But as she spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was walking into a trap. And she knew that if she was wrong, if she made a mistake, if she was discovered, then everything she'd worked for, everything she'd built, everything she'd loved, would be destroyed. The question was, would she be strong enough to survive? At Sunday service, Terence thought he had the upper hand, until Claudine stood up and told the truth. Lydia spent the night before her meeting with Deshawn in a state of nervous anticipation. She'd practiced her cover story, memorized the details of the FBI operation, and prepared herself for the possibility that she might not come back alive. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about her family, about her mother, who had worked so hard to build a life for them, about Amara, who was too young to understand the danger they were all in, about Terence, who had made so many mistakes but was still her brother. She thought about the church service the next morning, about how her family had always found strength and comfort in their faith. And she realized that if she was going to face these criminals, if she was going to risk everything to protect her family, then she needed to start with the truth. She needed to tell her family what was really happening. The next morning, as the family prepared for church, Lydia gathered everyone in the living room. She looked at her mother, her brother, her niece, and she knew that what she was about to say would change everything. "Mama," she said softly, "I need to tell you something. I've been working with the FBI for the past few days. They've been investigating this organization for months, and they believe that Selena and Deshawn are part of a larger criminal operation that has been targeting elderly homeowners across multiple states." Claudine's face went pale. "The FBI? Lydia, what have you gotten yourself into?" "I've gotten myself into protecting our family," Lydia said firmly. "But Mama, I need you to understand something. These people are dangerous. They've killed before. If they discover what we're doing, they won't hesitate to eliminate us." Terence was shaking, his face filled with guilt and fear. "Lydia, this is all my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved with these people, none of this would be happening." "It's not your fault," Lydia said, her voice gentle but firm. "You were manipulated, exploited, used. But now it's time to fight back. Now it's time to make sure these people never hurt another family again." Amara was crying, her young face filled with terror. "Aunt Lydia, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to meet with Deshawn tonight," Lydia said, her voice steady despite the fear in her heart. "I'm going to record everything he says, Gather evidence that will help the FBI bring down this organization.
But I need you all to understand something.
This is dangerous. If anything goes wrong, if I'm discovered, then we're all in danger. Later that morning, as the family sat in their usual pew at Mount Zion Baptist Church, Lydia couldn't stop thinking about the meeting that night. She knew that what she was about to do could cost her everything, but she also knew that if she didn't do it, they would lose everything anyway. The service began with the usual hymns and prayers, but Lydia could feel the tension in the air. Her family was sitting together, but they were all lost in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own prayers. Then, during the testimony time, when members of the congregation were invited to share their experiences and give thanks, Terence stood up. "Pastor," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, "I need to share something with the congregation. I need to ask for their prayers and their forgiveness." Lydia felt her blood run cold. She knew what Terence was about to do, and she knew that it would change everything. "Brothers and sisters," Terence said, his voice carrying throughout the church, "I've been living a lie. I've been gambling away money I didn't have, money I stole from my own mother. I've been involved with people who want to destroy our family, who want to take everything we've built together." The congregation was silent, every eye fixed on Terence as he spoke. "I've been manipulated by a woman who married me not out of love, but out of greed. She's been using me to try to steal my mother's house, to destroy our family, to take everything we've worked for." Lydia could see the shock on the faces of the congregation. They'd known Terence for years, had watched him grow up in this church, had seen him struggle with his gambling addiction. But they'd never imagined the depth of his involvement with these criminals. "Terence," Pastor Williams said, his voice gentle but firm, "we're here to support you. We're here to help you through this difficult time. But you need to understand that what you've done has consequences. You've put your family in danger, and you've brought evil into our community." Terence nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know, Pastor. I know I've made terrible mistakes. But I'm asking for your prayers. I'm asking for your support. Because I'm not going to let these people destroy our family anymore." Then, to everyone's surprise, Claudine stood up. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, but when she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone who had survived 69 years of life's hardest lessons. "Pastor," she said, her voice steady and strong, "I need to say something too. I need to tell this congregation what's really happening to our family." She looked around the church, at the faces of people she'd known for decades, people who had watched her raise her children, people who had supported her through the hardest times of her life. "For the past 6 months, my son has been manipulated by a criminal organization that targets elderly homeowners. They've been trying to steal my house, to destroy our family, to take everything we've built together. But I'm not going to let them." The congregation was silent, every eye fixed on Claudine as she spoke. "I've worked hard for everything I have. I've raised my children alone. I've paid my bills. I've built a life for my family. And I'm not going to let some criminals take that away from me. I'm not going to let them destroy what we've built together." She looked at Terence, her eyes filled with a mother's love and a woman's steel. "My son has made mistakes, but he's still my son. And I'm going to stand by him. I'm going to support him, and I'm going to help him fight back against these people who want to destroy us." As Claudine spoke, Lydia could see the impact of her words on the congregation. These were people who had known her family for years, who had watched them struggle and survive, who had supported them through the hardest times of their lives. And now they were hearing the truth about what was really happening. "Pastor," Claudine continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I'm asking for your prayers. I'm asking for your support. Because we're going to fight back. We're going to make sure these people never hurt another family again." The congregation erupted in applause. their support for Claudine and her family evident in their enthusiastic response. But Lydia knew that the real battle was just beginning. As the service ended and the family prepared to leave, Lydia couldn't stop thinking about the meeting that night. She knew that what she was about to do could cost her everything, but she also knew that if she didn't do it, they would lose everything anyway. But as she looked at her family, at the congregation that had rallied around them, at the strength and determination in her mother's eyes, she felt a surge of hope. They were not alone. They were not vulnerable. They were a family that had survived 69 years of life's hardest lessons, and they were ready to fight back. The question was, would they be strong enough to win? Terrence thought he could still win, but he didn't know about the insurance policy that would change everything. The old warehouse on Industrial Boulevard was exactly what Lydia had expected: dark, abandoned, and perfect for a clandestine meeting. She'd arrived 20 minutes early, scouting the area, checking for exits, preparing herself for the possibility that she might not leave alive. The recording device was hidden in her purse, undetectable by standard security equipment, but she knew that if she was discovered, it wouldn't matter. These people had killed before, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill again. At exactly 8 p.m., Deshawn appeared from the shadows, flanked by two men who looked like they'd stepped out of a crime movie. They were all business, no pleasantries, no small talk. "Miss Lydia," Deshawn said, his voice smooth and menacing, "I'm glad you decided to come. I was beginning to think you weren't going to cooperate." Lydia felt her blood run cold, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm here. What do you want?" "What I want," Deshawn said, moving closer, "is for you to understand the gravity of your situation. Your brother owes us a substantial amount of money, and we expect to be paid, one way or another." Deshawn's men moved to block the exits, and Lydia realized that she was trapped. But she also realized that this was exactly what the FBI had expected. They were monitoring her location, and if anything went wrong, they would extract her immediately. "Let me explain how this works," Deshawn continued, his voice carrying a note of warning. "Your brother has been gambling with money he doesn't have for months. He's been borrowing from us, promising to pay us back with interest. But he's not good for the money. He never was." Lydia's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to remain calm. "How much does he owe you?" $80,000, Deshawn said, his eyes never leaving her face. "Plus interest. Plus penalties. Plus the cost of our time and effort. All told, we're looking at about $150,000. The number hit Lydia like a physical blow. "That's more than my mother's house is worth." "Exactly," Deshawn said, his smile thin and humorless. "Which is why we need to be creative about how we collect our debt." He moved closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to convince your mother to sign those property transfer papers. You're going to make sure she understands that if she doesn't cooperate, her family will suffer the consequences." But before Deshawn could continue, Lydia's phone rang. It was Marcus, and she knew that he wouldn't call unless it was important. "Excuse me," she said, stepping away from the group. "I need to take this." "Lydia," Marcus's voice came through the phone, urgent and excited. "I found something. Something that changes everything." "What is it?" Lydia asked, her heart pounding with anticipation. "Your mother has an old insurance policy that names you as the beneficiary. It's worth $200,000, and it's been sitting in a safety deposit box for years. She forgot about it, but it's still valid." Lydia felt her world tilt on its axis. $200,000? Enough to pay off Terrence's debt and still have money left over. But here's the thing. This policy has a clause that allows the beneficiary to use the money to pay off family debts. It's perfectly legal, and it's exactly what we need. Lydia looked at Deshawn and his men, who were watching her with growing impatience. Marcus, I need to go. But this changes everything. She hung up the phone and turned back to Deshawn, a new confidence in her voice. I have a proposition for you. Deshawn's eyes narrowed. What kind of proposition? My mother has an insurance policy that names me as the beneficiary, Lydia said, her voice steady and strong. It's worth $200,000, and I'm willing to use it to pay off my brother's debt. Deshawn's face showed the first signs of surprise. $200,000? Enough to cover what Terrence owes you, plus interest, plus penalties, plus the cost of your time and effort. All you have to do is leave my family alone. Deshawn was silent for a moment, his mind racing with the implications of what Lydia had just told him. And if I refuse? Then I'll go to the FBI, Lydia said, her voice carrying a note of steel. I'll tell them everything I know about your operation, about Selena, about all the elderly homeowners you've been targeting. And I'll make sure they have enough evidence to put you away for life. Deshawn's men moved closer, their hands in their pockets, their posture threatening. You're in no position to make threats, one of them said. But I am in a position to make deals, Lydia said firmly. And this is my deal. Take the money, leave my family alone, and we'll call it even. Refuse, and I'll make sure you never see another penny from anyone. Deshawn was silent for a long moment, his mind racing with the implications of what Lydia had just told him. He knew that if she went to the FBI, if she provided them with evidence of their operation, then everything they'd built would be destroyed. But he also knew that if he accepted her deal, if he took the money and left her family alone, then he would be walking away from a much larger operation. He would be giving up the chance to steal properties worth millions of dollars. Ms. Lydia, he said finally, his voice carrying a note of warning, you need to understand something. This isn't just about your brother's debt. This is about a much larger operation. We've been targeting elderly homeowners across multiple states for years. We've made millions of dollars, and we're not going to stop just because one family decides to fight back. Lydia felt her blood run cold. What are you saying? I'm saying that if you go to the FBI, if you try to bring down our operation, then we'll make sure you and your family pay the price. We'll make sure you understand what happens to people who cross us. Lydia looked at Deshawn, at his men, at the dark warehouse around her. She knew that what he was saying was true, that these people were part of a much larger operation, that they had resources and connections that went far beyond what she'd imagined. But she also knew that if she backed down now, if she gave in to their threats, then she would be condemning her family to a lifetime of fear and manipulation. I'm not backing down, Lydia said, her voice filled with steel. I'm not giving in to your threats. And I'm not going to let you destroy my family. Deshawn's face went cold, and his men moved closer. Then you've made your choice, he said, and you'll have to live with the consequences. But as he spoke, Lydia heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The FBI had been monitoring her location, and they were moving in. Ms. Lydia, Agent Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. We're moving in. Stay where you are and don't make any sudden movements. Lydia looked at Deshawn, at his men, at the dark warehouse around her. She knew that the real battle was just beginning, that these people were not going to give up easily, that they were going to fight back with everything they had. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had the FBI on her side, she had her family's support, and she had the strength that came from knowing she was fighting for what was right. The question was, would it be enough? 1 year later, Claudine's house wasn't just a home anymore. It was a fortress of family love. The FBI raid on the warehouse had been swift and decisive. Deshawn and his men had been arrested, their operation dismantled, and their victims finally freed from the web of manipulation and exploitation that had trapped them for months. But for Lydia and her family, the real work was just beginning. The legal battles, the emotional healing, The process of rebuilding trust and relationships, all of it would take time, patience, and a determination that had been forged through months of struggle and survival. As Lydia sat in her mother's living room, watching the morning sun stream through the windows, she couldn't help but think about how much had changed in the past year. The house was the same, but everything else was different. The fear was gone, replaced by a sense of security and peace that she hadn't felt in years. Terrence had spent 6 months in a rehabilitation program, working through his gambling addiction and the emotional trauma that had led him to make such destructive choices. He'd lost his job, his marriage, and most of his friends, but he'd gained something more valuable, a chance to start over, to rebuild his life, to become the man he'd always wanted to be. "Lydia," he said, sitting across from her at the dining table, "I know I can never make up for what I did. I know I can never undo the pain I caused. But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm trying to be better, to do better, to be the brother and son you deserve." Lydia looked at her brother, really looked at him, and she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Hope. Real hope. Not the false hope that had led him to make such destructive choices, but the kind of hope that comes from knowing you have a second chance. "Terrence," she said softly, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free from the anger and resentment that was eating me alive. And because I believe that people can change, that they can learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves." Terrence's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance to prove that I can be better." Amara had thrived in the year since the crisis. She'd graduated from high school with honors, been accepted to college, and was planning to study social work so she could help other families who were struggling with addiction and manipulation. "Grandma," she said, sitting next to Claudine on the couch, "I want you to know that what happened last year didn't break our family. It made us stronger. It showed us what we're capable of when we work together, when we support each other, when we refuse to give up." Claudine smiled, her face radiant with pride and love. "Amara, you're absolutely right. We've been through hell and back, but we're still standing. We're still together. And we're still fighting for what's right." The insurance policy had been a game changer. The $200,000 had been used to pay off Terrence's debts, cover the legal expenses, and establish a foundation to help other elderly homeowners who were being targeted by similar criminal organizations. The Claudine Williams Foundation had become a beacon of hope for families across the state. Named after Claudine, it provided legal assistance, financial counseling, and emotional support to elderly homeowners who were being exploited by criminals. "Mrs. Claudine," Marcus said, sitting across from her in the Foundation's office, "we've helped over 50 families in the past year. We've prevented over $2 million in property theft, and we've brought down 3 more criminal organizations that were targeting elderly homeowners." Claudine felt a surge of pride. "Marcus, that's wonderful. But we're just getting started. There are still too many families out there who are being exploited, who don't know where to turn for help." "You're absolutely right," Marcus said. "And that's why we're expanding our operations. We're opening offices in 3 more states, hiring additional staff, and developing new programs to help families protect themselves from these predators." Lydia looked around the office, at the photos of families they'd helped, at the thank you letters from grateful homeowners, at the sense of purpose and meaning that filled every corner of the space. "Mama," she said, "we've turned our pain into purpose. We've taken the worst thing that ever happened to us and used it to help other people. And that's something to be proud of." The Sunday service at Mount Zion Baptist Church was different now. The congregation had rallied around Claudine and her family, providing support, encouragement, and a sense of community that had helped them through their darkest hours. "Brothers and sisters," Pastor Williams said, standing at the pulpit, We've learned a lot in the past year. We've learned that evil exists in this world, that there are people who will prey on the vulnerable and the innocent. But we've also learned that we don't have to face these challenges alone. The congregation was silent, every eye fixed on the pastor as he spoke. Mrs. Claudine and her family have shown us what it means to fight back, what it means to stand up for what's right, what it means to turn pain into purpose. They've shown us that when we work together, when we support each other, when we refuse to give up, then we can overcome any obstacle, any challenge, any threat. Claudine looked around the church, at the faces of people she'd known for decades, people who had supported her through the hardest times of her life. She felt a surge of gratitude and love. "Pastor," she said, standing up to speak, "I want to thank this congregation for everything you've done for my family. You've been our rock, our support, our family when we needed you most. And I want you to know that we're going to keep fighting, keep working, keep helping other families who are facing the same challenges we faced." The congregation erupted in applause, their support for Claudine and her family evident in their enthusiastic response. As the service ended and the family prepared to leave, Claudine couldn't help but think about how much had changed in the past year. The fear was gone, replaced by a sense of security and peace. The anger was gone, replaced by forgiveness and understanding. The despair was gone, replaced by hope and determination. "Mama," Lydia said, taking her mother's arm as they walked out of the church, "I'm proud of what we've accomplished. I'm proud of how we've turned our pain into purpose, how we've used our experience to help other people." Claudine smiled, her face radiant with love and pride. "Lydia, I'm proud of you too. You've shown me what it means to be strong, what it means to fight for what's right, what it means to never give up." They walked to the car together, a family that had been through hell and back, but had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. As they drove home, Claudine looked at her house, the house that had been the center of so much drama, so much pain, so much struggle. But now it was something else. It was a symbol of resilience, of family love, of the power of determination and faith. It was a fortress of family love, and it was home.